Thanks everyone, and welcome back if you've joined us for the previous two sessions, or welcome if this is the first session you've joined us for. This session we're going to talk a little bit more about international networks and communities. So today very much the focus is on the international element of Beyond the Borders, but this particular session is focusing around applied Shakespeare within the criminal justice system. So we've heard from a number of people across the globe, China, Japan, Russia, Cyprus and other places so far. We widen that net out even further now, and I'm delighted to invite some wonderful panelists. So I'm going to hand over to them very shortly and allow them to each introduce themselves. We're very much talking around working within the carceral environment today. So if you'd like to introduce yourselves one by one, that would be fantastic, and then we can get underway in terms of some questions. Jonathan, would you like to go first?
Oh, sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Jonathan Shaler. I'm a professor of communication at the University of Wisconsin-Parkside and the founder and director of the Shakespeare Prison Project, which is a collaboration with Racine Correctional Institution.
Hi, my name is Hyson Williams, and I am an alumnus of the Racine Prison, Shakespeare Prison Project, mentored by Dr. John Shaler. I was in the first 4 productions, and I currently live in Wisconsin.
I'm Franny Shepard-Bates. I am the director of Shakespeare in Prison at Detroit Public Theater. And we've, for the past 9 years, worked with women and men and youth. And we also work with alumni of our program after they've returned home.
Hello from me. My name is Stratis Panourios. I run the first theater program in the main prison of Greece, Korydallos Prison, a collaboration with the Ministry of Justice and the National Theatre. I worked there from 2016 until now.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. So I'm very conscious of time on this panel, so we're going to get straight underway with some questions, if that's okay with everyone. If anybody has got any questions they'd like to put in the Q&A box, anything burning issues that you'd like to ask the panelists, please do. And please also do comment in the chat function. We want this to be a conversation. Unfortunately, electronic means are the only way we can get together at the moment, but we very much want to hear your views as well. So I'm going to go firstly to Stratis, if that's okay. Now, obviously, you've mentioned that you've been working within Korydallos Prison for a number of years. And I just wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about what form that work takes and how that work's been received by the prisoners and the staff that you've worked alongside and worked with.
Yes, my first experience as a director and animator was in January 2016 when I started a theatrical workshop with Kethea Andrasi. This program consisting of counseling, treatment and social reintegration for former inmates who are drug users. I started this program with 25 participants, and after we worked together for 6 months, and after a series of meetings, we would create together the theatrical performance, The Guest, The Young Man, The Reborn Man, based on Kipling's poem, If. The participants in the group wrote their own If, on which the performance was based. During these 6 months, I understood more deeply the meaning of theatrical art in prison, its value and the real opportunity it gives to transform not only the moments, but also the later life of a man who not only struggles with incarceration, but also with addictions. From middle of 2016, I started working as director and actor at the National Theatre, and also ran this program. Our first performance was Tempest, The second performance was Chekhov's novel Ward Number 6, and the third performance was Glengarry Glen Rose by David Mamet. Now works the Persians, the Persians of Aeschylus. On the 21st of June 2017, after 8 months of intense studying and rehearsing, we played the Tempest inside the yard of prison, and here I have these magical Ariels coming from a tree inside the yard. I keep it. I have a lot of responsibilities in this project. I have the collaborations through the ministry, the prison, and the National Theatre, whatever it means. These things for the beginning.
Brilliant. No, fantastic to hear about the work that you've done. And now we're all wishing that you were with us in person so we could actually see and touch that. But unfortunately, electronic doesn't quite work the same. Thanks so much, Stratis. Jonathan, moving on to thinking about some of the work that you've also been doing. Now, I know obviously the Shakespeare Prison Project has been running for a number of years now. And I just wonder if you could maybe talk to us a little bit about how your practice has developed over time and what kind of community has been created amongst those that have been involved. Obviously, I know some of those people are no longer incarcerated, but what kind of community ethos and spirit has been created?
Sure. Thank you so much, Rowan. It's wonderful to be a part of this conference. Thank you for inviting us. So the Shakespeare Prison Project in Wisconsin has a very long history. As you know, it has a prehistory that dates back to 1995, when I began as a volunteer educator at Racine Correctional Institution and did devised theater with prisoners. We called it the Theater of Empowerment, and it was very much based on the work of Auguste Boal. We created scenes and stories related to the experiences of the men, performed them for the prison at large, and use that as a basis for engaging in dialogue about overcoming oppression, both personal and social. Then the Shakespeare Project kicked off in 2004, and Hyson Williams, who's our other guest here from the Shakespeare Project, was right there on the ground level. And we did King Lear the first year, Othello, The Tempest, Julius Caesar in the ensuing years. And these are full productions with costumes and props and music. The process involves 9 months of work on a play, a study, performance, dialogue, writing in journals, discussing characters and themes. And then in a later phase of the program, we began something called Shakespeare's Mirror, which were devised theater pieces by the men in response to the plays. Some of them have been published, and this is wonderful work that I'm very proud of. We had many phases in the work. I'm not going to go into details. That's the broad outline. But I would say that in terms of community, we've built community both within the prison and beyond prison walls, which I'm very excited about. So we've brought in Shakespeare scholars, such as when we did the production of Cymbeline, the editor of the Arden edition of Cymbeline came in and joined us. She was a discussant throughout the year, but then was able to fly in and participate. Also a scholar from Britain. And so we also bring in the families of the participants, their guests, the public at large. And then, as Hyson will perhaps tell you more about, we have a Shakespeare Beyond Bars program where former participants in the inside now outside, make public presentations at international conferences at the university, and this summer wonderfully joined the Shakespeare in Prisons network for a series of full readings of 20 Shakespeare plays over the 10 months, which is one way to deal with COVID. So that's enough from me for now, but thank you, Rowan.
Wonderful, thanks, Jonathan. And I think it was a wonderful way to deal with the effects of COVID. Just a little bit difficult from the time perspective with the time difference for me. That was, it was worth every moment. Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing just a flavour of the work that you've been doing. I know there's so much more. We could spend 40 minutes on each of you, I'm sure, with still more to talk about. Franny, I know obviously you moving on to speak a little bit more about your work, and you work both with incarcerated and with formerly incarcerated people, and it's made such an impact. I just wonder if you'd like to talk a little bit about the edited text of Richard III that you're working on with people, and what, you know, what prompted you to decide to do this, and also then what impact you hope this will have in the wider world.
Yeah, thank you so much. So our process, generally speaking, is that we spend about 40 minutes, about 40 weeks exploring one play by Shakespeare in the prison. We meet twice a week, and we meet for 40 weeks. We eventually perform it, but the main thing that we do with it is we read it together, and then we put it together. We're fully collaborative. Nobody's in charge. We're not teaching anything. It's what do you bring to the text, and what do you pull out of the text, and how do we tell the story together? So in our 2016-2017 season, the women's ensemble worked on Richard III, and we took a ton of notes because we were doing a case study on the program, which if we have time, I can tell you about for like 2 minutes. And if not, I'm going to post a bunch of links in the chat for you. But so we had a ton of notes from this. Fast forward a couple of years, and one of the men's ensemble members came to us and said, hey, what if there are probably other people out there who don't know how to do this and, you know, cut the text down to 90 minutes. What if we shared ours? Because we've already done most of the work for them, which was the germ of this idea to put together a critical edition of Richard III, where all of the analysis would be in verbatim quotes from the women who worked on it at the time when they were in prison, and some of those women now that they are home as well. And we compensated them for their work. And I'm going to briefly share, because it's a little easier to see this if I share an overview. There's original artwork here. This is original artwork from an alumna of the women's ensemble. When I post a link to this document, there's kind of a guide to reading it. But essentially, it looks a lot like any critical edition of Shakespeare, where you've got the text of the play on the left, as well as some more information. And you know, and this is a sample. We'd obviously work with a publisher to come up with the final form. But on the right-hand page is really the crux of it, which is that analysis by those women. And those come, again, in verbatim quotes. This is either recorded in a Zoom conversation out here, so it is completely verbatim, or it's as close as we could get in our notes. And so what we see here is some really unique analysis coming from lived experience rather than anything that's been taught. And so I know that it's tough to see this as I'm scrolling through it on Zoom. I will post a link in the chat. We're hoping that this is going to be something, and I saw a question about this, where we don't want to be colonizing with Shakespeare. We want to be, you know, democratizing it and saying, like, Shakespeare is not just for certain people, and it's not just, you know, for everyone, but it is owned by everyone. It belongs to everyone. And we're hoping to really knock down some barriers and smash some stereotypes and put this out to the world. So if you are a publisher, or if you know one and you're interested, you know, let me know.
Fantastic. Thanks, Franny. And couldn't agree more. I think it's so important that we don't see Shakespeare as some kind of panacea for, you know, it will make the world better, or it will make people better. That's not what it's about, is it? And I think all of the people that I personally feel very fortunate to know within the Shakespeare in Prisons community absolutely understand that. Now, I suspect that we've probably could spend, you know, again, a huge amount of time with everybody now reading your links to this, but if you could just hang fire for a moment, I'm sure we can share those at the end. And I want to move across to Haisan now. Now, obviously, you're an alum of the Shakespeare in Prisons project, and which Jonathan facilitated. And I just wonder, Haisan, if you could maybe talk a little bit about, you know, sort of what it was that encouraged you to get involved whilst you're incarcerated, and what effect that work had on you both during the time of your sentence and upon your release back into community.
Sure. I do want to, again, I want to thank you for inviting me and having us and giving everyone an opportunity to hear the awesome thing that people are doing everywhere. I really do like what you got going, Franny. I think that rocks. My interest in the Shakespeare Prison Project was really something that was the result of years of like seeking to find myself. I had a lengthy sentence and had gone through many permutations of the me I wanted to be. My self-analysis kind of had revealed one of the things that I acknowledge about myself is that I am an artist. The things that appeal to me most were centered in art, be it my music, my ability to write. I perform and have done many things artistic, and that's where I found the most peace. And so I created this art environment for myself within my incarceration. And the years passed, and I left one facility to the next, and a major incident happened. I was packed up in the middle of the night and dropped off at RCI at 2 o'clock in the morning. And once I was released in population, I saw an old posting, months old, about being a play. I'm like, what? Are you serious? And one of my brothers in faith was on the unit with me, and I asked about it. He happened to be involved in the play, and he's like, yeah, come on up, man, come on up. And I'm like, are you serious? Because, you know, institutions have very strict rules about movement. It's like, no, it's cool, come on up. It's interesting that on my way up, I found out I had a visit, so I wasn't able to go directly up. I went on my visit, and I came back, and I walked to the library, which is where we met, and that's when I first met John, and that's what got me involved. They were doing King Lear. I observed the first day and made a couple comments. John and I had a small conversation afterwards, and I asked for his permission to be involved in whatever way I could. And it just started a relationship where the next year was Othello. I played the lead in that, and the following year was The Tempest. I was fortunate enough to, initially I was just going to do the music, which I did. I did the original score for our production, and I ended up playing Ariel as well. And then Julius Caesar was our last play, and I was blessed and fortunate enough to play the role of Brutus. So the transition, you asked, it benefited me. And while at that stage of my development, and I say this, and I want to qualify because it was just my experience. I don't think this is true for everyone, but this was my experience. It spoke to my inner spirit, spoke to the true me, and I was a little bit more confident. I carried myself with a lot more esteem, and I felt dignified. Being honored to be part of something like that. It had nothing to do with the press or the media or even the esteem within the institution. But as I say that, I realized that there was some esteem within the institution. You know, we were considered, at the very least, men who were transcending our physical environment and taking it to a next level. And our performances, while they probably weren't Broadway quality, they were well performed. We understood the language. We were not just guys reciting lines. There was some depth and understanding to that. So it did help my esteem. And fast forward all 9 years from then, and I've been released, and it immediately, within 2 months of my release, started to pay dividends with my first public speaking opportunity, which opened doors for me that are still being opened today. So that's just my story, and I believe it is unique, and because the truth is that I bought in 100%, and I've reaped a reward that, I mean, John is no longer Dr. Shaler to me. He's John, and while you are now Dr. Rowan, I've met all you wonderful people through this process. So you asked, and I hope that journey answers your question.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks, Hassan. And absolutely. And I think it is important that we acknowledge that everybody's experience is different. I think we often talk about lived experience, which is so valuable. But I think it's about realizing that homogenization of lived experience is actually detrimental, and that each person experiences their own set of circumstances, their own set of experiences, and what they draw from it. But I know, you and I are obviously friends as well, and the amount that you've obviously taken from the project, but also given to the project, can't be underestimated. So fantastic. Thank you so much. So I just want to talk a little bit about probably some more general questions now. So I'm just going to throw some questions out there, and whoever wants to share their thoughts, please do so. We've also got a great amount of stuff going on in the chat, which is fantastic. And I can't multitask that well, so I'm not really reading it in as much detail as I should, but there we go. So I think one of the things that obviously really interests me as both practitioner and academic is around one of the significant challenges that prison practitioners always face is around quantifiable impacts and results. And in a results focused world, we all know that is often called upon for funding applications, for getting access to prisons, for getting the Ministry of Justice to approve or support work, etc. So I'm just interested in how people address this in their own work, or any suggestions that people have, because I think it's the kind of $1 million question for so many of us who are prison practitioners. So shamelessly asking for ideas that we could bring together in collaborative ways.
I'll drop a link in the chat on this. I recently reviewed a book that was co-edited by Michael Balfour on prison arts, and there are wonderful resources for documentation of the work, the kind of work that we do in that text. It's a gold mine. But in terms of the Shakespeare Prison Project, we do yearly evaluations. So we have documented the men's stories. One of my favorite questions to ask is, what was the most impactful event for you in the entire year of our work on the play? And those stories are just gold in terms of sharing with the public and with funders. So I would recommend that kind of data collection. We also compared the what are they called? Hi-san, help me out reports. Here. Yes, the conduct reports that men in the general population get versus men in the Shakespeare Project, and there's a very dramatic difference. Virtually no conduct reports in the participants compared to the larger population. So that plays well with the prison administrators. So that's a start. I'll drop a link to that book, by the way, in the chat.
Brilliant. Thanks, John.
Yeah. What we do is we love that anecdotal stuff that Jonathan was talking about. And we also found that we just wanted to, like Rowan said, we wanted to quantify it a little more. So I mentioned the case study we did in 2016-17, and I'm going to post a link to that in the chat. Essentially what we were looking at was how does participation in Shakespeare in Prison affect participants' narrative identity within the correctional context? Narrative identity being the way that I define who I am based on the way that I understand and tell my life story. And so what we look at is something called reader response theory, which we extrapolated out to being applying to performance as well, where I see myself in the text and I gain perspective. It makes me think differently. I'm listening to other people respond to the text and perform, and what do I gain from that? We developed not only a lot of notes to get these quotes from everybody, but a coding system so that we could kind of quantify what's going on and watch somebody's arc, not just in their own words, but in their words as coded, to kind of apply across the board. We did run that study by participants of our program, and they said, yes, that is exactly what's happening. So we can share that. We also did follow-up interviews over Zoom last year with alumni of the Women's Ensemble. to see, like, has this continued? And what we found from those interviews is that it does continue. It continues into an enhanced sense of self-efficacy, more fully developed empathy for oneself and others, and a positive sense of community. And all of this transcends those barbed wire fences, and continues to develop in a positive way, whatever that means per individual, because we never want to homogenize, like you said.
Brilliant. Thanks, Franny. Stratis, any thoughts from the work you do?
Yes, I have a lot of thoughts. First of all, I think when we talk about Shakespeare, we talk about theater. And when we talk about theater, we talk about dialogue. Dialogue means communion, communication, connection, the act of listening, giving space, understanding. Dialogue is the child of democracy, and democracy gave birth to the theater. I have one story to share with you. I would like to give you an example of Shakespeare's transformative power in relations to the participants who played Prospero. In the discussions we had, the actor, he believed that Prospero should not forgive his brother Antonio, and he was absolute in it. So we are all in a strange and difficult position and how to proceed with the performance. A month before the performance, he finally changed his mind. As I later learned, he had been jailed because of his brother and would have to forgive his real brother first and then play the role. 2 years later, he sent me a photo with his brother.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, a real far more than the evidence research base and all the rest of it, but actually a life changed. So fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I actually want to come to one of the questions. I'm trying to multitask here. I want to come to one of the questions that's been asked in the Q&A box. So Maria McNair's spoken about looking at Shakespeare in Prison Programme and seeing some criticism about the idea of, the Shakespeare missionary complex. And I think it's something that all of us as practitioners grapple with every day, and the idea that Shakespeare is some unique cultural saviour. So Maria would like to hear the panelists' thoughts on this type of criticism, and I would hope how we might combat that and the things that occur to us as part of this work that we do.
Could I speak to that as
go for it?
I wanted because as you sit in most of you guys know, there are many different faces and many different stories that bring the many different people into an incarceral setting. The path to prison is not one linear path. And as a result, to think that there's this monolith or this single means by which to address the issues that bring people to prison is a notion that has failed over the years, because the type of treatments that they have been utilizing are sort of meant to speak to a very linear path, and the linear path is not what brought the myriad of people to prison. So to address specifically now whether Shakespeare is creating some or the Shakespeare prison outreach mission is creating something other than a different means by which to address certain things, open certain doors for people, I think is losing sight of the fact that whatever is happening in corrections ain't working. So at least be open to using art or anything else, because there's just a very small population that it may reach, but nothing else would have. I can say from my experience, I've taken you become treatment savvy. You couldn't really fake certain empathy. You couldn't really fake your way and intellectually through Shakespeare. You had to buy in to it, and it removed barriers. Again, one could become very savvy to finessing through the system. And so an opportunity to touch someone in a way that maybe no other program has. And again, maybe for the next person, it may be a creative writing class. For the next person, it may be a painting with colors or whatever. But for this individual and for a lot of people, Shakespeare has been that vehicle, and far be it for any of us to not want the most effective means to be utilized. And sometimes that's a huge amount of different things. So I would open up I don't think there's a fair challenge to that just being part of a many faceted solution to a lot of different things. How's that?
Great.
And this is like the main reason that we're doing this Richard III critical edition, is to say that, you know, like the ensemble members say, like, as people who've been incarcerated, we have a unique perspective to bring here that is important, because if what Shakespeare does is it helps us learn about not just ourselves, but humanity. And we need to hear from all of humanity about Shakespeare. The other part of it is that there's so many reasons to work with Shakespeare, but a big part of it for Shakespeare specifically, as opposed to other types of theater that are also extremely helpful, is that because the language is so different from the language we use now, but we recognize ourselves in the characters and situations, we can talk about, for folks who, like Hassan said, have kind of learned the in and outs of therapy and it doesn't work for them for whatever reason, they can talk about their experiences through the characters with language that feels safe, because it's not in their own words. It's not the way that they would naturally, you know, phrase it. And so they can express themselves. You know, a woman who does Lady Anne's monologue where she's cursing Richard said afterwards, she goes, I don't know all the words she's saying, but I felt like for the first time in my life, I could express my grief about my sister's murder and people heard me. So that's part of she couldn't express it for years and years otherwise, but given this language that felt safe because it was not her own, she was finally able to do that. She's a playwright now. She does all sorts of things now where she does express herself, which is amazing.
I just want to echo what Franny said very quickly about Shakespeare's elevated language that taps into something universal and provides a kind of conduit or vehicle for emotional expression that may be difficult for us. I know in my own personal experience that I first hooked into Shakespeare by my connection with the King Lear play, and how it tapped into certain difficult emotional experiences I had had as a child. That's why I brought this work into prison. It was through my own direct experience, not through any kind of missionary zeal, but through a desire to share and to help. And we had one guy in the program recently who did Mark Antony's Cry Havoc speech. He's an Iraq war veteran. He was very reticent about that experience until he had the opportunity to develop that speech, perform it in front of all of the guys. And after he was done with the speech, he just paced the stage. He was in an altered state, and he began to tell us the story of his experience in Iraq. And we were riveted by that. It was just a tremendous experience. So yes, Shakespeare's language, absolutely. Sorry.
No.
A little carried away.
No,
But I think these experiences show that there's so much depth and richness to each person's opportunity to have that vehicle, to deny or try to reduce it to something other than just an opportunity. It takes away from these experiences.
absolutely.
What is
and
Lucienne getting at, do you think?
pardon?
What do you think Lucienne is getting at with her comment? Maybe she could follow up with a clarification. I'm not sure what that was in reference to.
Yeah, that would be great, Lucienne, if you could just explain a little bit more. I'm just very conscious of time. I know we've got about 5 minutes left, and I won't run over because I've been warned that what will happen if that happens. But I did also, while hopefully Lucienne is able to share a little bit more about what she's thinking there. I did also have one question that was topical in terms of, obviously, you know, we've just hopefully are coming through the COVID pandemic to some degree, but obviously as prison practitioners, we've had a population who have been more impacted by the pandemic than possibly many other populations across the world. And obviously that's halted the work that many of us have been doing inside prisons with, you know, little or no opportunity to engage. And I just wonder if people would like to talk or can talk a little bit about, you know, how they have been able to maintain contact if they have, and I guess what we've learned from that we could hopefully take forward.
We've been sending through the mail activity packs inspired by Rowan's work, sending in activity packs that begin with some text from a play, and then have a quote unquote translation, because some of these folks really benefit from that. And then prompts for activities for, you know, for working with that text. And I'll stop there because you can download any of those you want from our website, which I posted a link to earlier.
Here in Athens, from the beginning of March 2020, the program stopped. Okay, for about a year, the communications was difficult. After the first shock of this pandemic, the prison sociologists began to recreate the new group, as most of its members has been released from this prison. And I want to say that in these 4 years, we have 120 participants, and 90% of these are now free. And no one returns in the jail, no one.
Brilliant.
And in the end of June, we begin again the program.
Nice.
Yes.
Thank goodness.
Yes.
I can imagine everyone will be very pleased to see the program restarting.
I don't know. I know that people are starting to be allowed back in. One of the things that came out of that and kind of the nexus of our interacting was the opportunity to realize that there are more ways than being directly in the prisons, that we've opened, you know, an opportunity to maybe make videos and be able to share them through an electronic way. So there are opportunities for despite COVID. And I think John, I'm sure, is going to speak to you, because I think you're going back in soon, aren't you, John?
Yes. In the fall, in September. And I also wanted to mention that Haisan has been part of a wonderful effort out of San Diego's Globe Theater, the Reflecting Shakespeare program, organized by Erica Phillips and her partner, which is really a wonderful way of connecting through video. You know, Haisan's been on that several times.
And we were hoping to mimic that eventually over time in our area. And there's so many good things to build on. And the good relationship allows us to kind of take the good stuff and make our own from it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens from that.
Fantastic. And just briefly to mention a collaborative project that we managed to organise for some of the prisons in the UK, both Franny and Jonathan, along with Jonathan's brother Chris, were involved in, to record a piece of text that was written by the Gallowfield Players, which is one of the prison theatre companies that I have the pleasure to work with, that was then broadcast out through Way Out TV to over 50 prisons in England and Wales. Which was fantastic to see something that traditionally has been an in-prison arts festival for 2 weeks, run for, I think in totality around 4 months, because it was so well received that they had requests to televise it every few weeks. So they did. So fantastic that we were able to kind of bring those collaborations together and look at international networks and international communities, I guess. that obviously spread further out than simply the individual institutions that we work within. So really conscious of time, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you for joining, both panelists and all of the audience. I know we've had a great conversation in the chat as well. If anybody wants to save the chat, you can. You click on the 3 little dots and it allows you to save it, because there's been some great links to resources, etc. shared. I think it's probably safe to say on behalf of all of us as panelists that this will be the first of many conversations, or I'd certainly hope so.
Absolutely.
So thanks ever so much for your time, and thank you to the 4 of you for sharing some of the great experiences and the work that you've done. And, you know, it's been an incredibly challenging 16 months now for all of us, but let's hope that we can get back in and get back to what we do and what our actors do so well. So thank you.
Thank you for having us, Ron. Thank you very much.
Welcome.